Bucks dodge a massive bullet, but they're not out of the woods yet. We take a look at a big week ahead without Giannis on today's Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. My name is Justin Garcia. You can hear me on the Bucks Radio Network each and every game. We thank you for making this your first listen of the day each and every day. And we also thank you for helping make the Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network out there. Also, thanks to all the everydayers for helping make Locked On Bucks one of the top growing NBA shows out there as well. Today's episode of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. Well, we held off on recording this one until we started to get any type of word on Giannis' status, and we got that early in the evening on Tuesday. It seems like this is really best case scenario for what we set ourselves up for. I'm sure Camille addressed this too on the postgame following the loss of the Cavs, but I'm sure when you saw groin strain, everyone rushed to the internet to try to see what is the typical timeline for a groin strain. And it obviously is dependent on what's the severity of it, but it could range from anywhere between a week, 2 weeks to 4 months or so, depending on how severe this is. I had, in talking with a few others as well, set myself up for, I think this is probably going to fall somewhere in the middle, especially when you heard Doc Rivers mentioning after the game, we think this is something that occurred earlier in the game. I think there was some moments Doc referenced where he said Giannis kind of favored that, or we could see him kind of grabbing at it, and then ultimately goes down with what the team called the groin strain shortly thereafter. So I think we were all kind of bargaining with ourselves. This is probably going to be about a month that Giannis misses. And to be clear, it still may be, right? I know Doc was on part of the Bucks Plus platform with the Courtside show and mentioned that it's going to be a week to 2 weeks for Giannis. What I would say is that by no means means that Giannis is going to absolutely be back in 2 weeks. It could drag on a bit. It could be we're going to reevaluate him in 2 weeks and maybe it becomes 3 weeks then, right? But at least the good news that we receive here is this isn't that muscle's torn and this is going to be months that we're talking about. I think you still have some reservations, concerns, maybe not quite concerned, but at least elevated thoughts on a soft tissue injury in general and just how important Giannis is to this team. I mean, it goes without saying. He's arguably the best player in the league. Of course, he's important, but there's numbers to back up just how important it is. And, it's as if the Bucks or Bucks fans needed a reminder of this. You look no further than the last handful of trips to the postseason outside of last year to show just how important Giannis is in the big picture of things. And that, with the way that this team is built, especially in the makeup of this group, as a not top-heavy team, top-heavy in the sense that it's Giannis and then a whole lot of depth, but this is no longer multiple stars. This is Giannis's show. I think that incentivizes you to be even more cautious with Giannis, even if it means in the short term there's going to be a lot of pain and there's probably going to be some losses that you otherwise did not foresee coming. Maybe this means it jeopardizes where you ultimately finish in terms of the standings. That's irrelevant in the big picture of things here. The important part is none of this works and none of this matters with this construct of this iteration of the Bucks if you don't have Giannis on the floor. So I do think we're going to see a cautious approach, and it sounds like best case scenario for this Bucks team would be right around the time and maybe exactly the same time that Giannis is healed and able to make his return to the floor here, that would kind of sync and line up with the time that Kevin Porter Jr. is due to be making his return. All we know, based on the timelines for KPJ, was roughly a month, 4 weeks was the timeline, the soft timeline that we were given, which would line up really with your return after that game at home next 1 week from Saturday against the Brooklyn Nets. So once you get into your December slate of games, ideally you'd be getting Kevin Porter Jr. back on the floor for those games. And it may be when you get Giannis Antetokounmpo back on the floor as well. But in the here and now, you've got a difficult stretch. I know Camille and I have talked about this quite a bit. You got a difficult stretch of games in front of you, and not only are you going to have to do it without another one of your facilitators and shot creators and shot makers, once again, in Kevin Porter Jr., but you add Giannis into that mix as well. So if this is 2 weeks, that would line up basically with a road game on December 1st in D.C., 2 weeks, again, it's not a hard and fast here, and I part of me has a hard time seeing if that is the game that lines up precisely with 2 weeks. Are you really going to travel Giannis out to D.C. for a game against the Wizards especially, or do you, if he's cleared to return for that first week of December, do you just keep him back in Milwaukee for 2 home games you have that week leading into a big weekend game, and then ultimately maybe the quarterfinals of the NBA Cup and potentially semifinals, although this has massive implications on that now. Otherwise, just 2 other makeup games that'll be scheduled for the Bucks. So, if Giannis passes through everything with flying colors and we stick to this 2-week timeline, it kind of feels like December 3rd against the Pistons at home would be the likely return date for Giannis. And if that's the case, we're talking about 7 games that he will have missed. So that's the other thing, too. It doesn't leave you a whole lot of wiggle room for the final, 4+ months of the season, but it's at least not anything, as of right now, that is like a multiple-month injury that we're talking about, or even a month, where it's going to be butting right up against that games played restriction and cutoff to qualify for individual awards and things like all NBA. So that's what we know so far. Again, I expect this to be a maybe not fluid situation, but I expect there's going to be updates and changes along the way here. But I think we can all breathe easy that it certainly feels and sounds like the Bucks did dodge a massive bullet here in terms of just how severe that injury was for Giannis. I mentioned some of these numbers and why it is imperative to have Giannis, right? We're all aware of that, but just how important he has been into the mix of things for this group. We'll take a look at some of those numbers. And I mentioned the 6-7 games, roughly best case scenario, although I suppose they left the door open for a week, so there is an even better case scenario. But the likely games that Giannis is due to mix, we'll take a look at that as this schedule really starts to pick up here as early as tomorrow. So we'll dig into those thoughts coming up after this on Locked On Bucks. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Nobody likes paying rent, but if you must, you might as well get something for it. That's where Built comes in. Built's changing the game by turning your rent payment into real rewards you can actually use. When you pay rent through Built, you earn flexible points that can be redeemed toward hundreds of hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, maybe even your next Lyft ride, and so many more options. But Built isn't just about rent. It's about rewarding you around your entire neighborhood. You can earn points every month towards something you already have to pay. Whether it's grabbing food at your local restaurant, heading to the gym, all of it accumulates rewards. Built makes everyday life feel more rewarding, from your neighborhood to your travel plans. So turn your rent into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood by going to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnba. That's joinbuilt.com/lockedonnba. Make sure to use that link so they know we sent you. All right, so this schedule gets very challenging. I mean, it's currently challenging, and this is a larger discussion. The Bucks aren't alone here, right? We've once again seen some marquee names pop up and miss time on the injury report. The Knicks, you can make a strong case, dodged a bullet as well when you saw Jalen Brunson go down with the same ankle that cost him 15 games, essentially leading into the playoffs last season. Victor Wembanyama has gone down. You have guys like a Paul George. I know we're talking about a lesser extent here, but Paul George just made his season debut. Tyler Hero hasn't made his season debut yet. So we're starting to see more and more names beyond Wemby. There's more members of the Spurs. Stephon Castle, Dylan Harper, both battling injuries. It's picking up across the league. And it's not new. It's not exclusive to this year. It's been a recent trend. Tom Haberstroh dug into the games missed here by your star-level players to start the season, and not just this year, but the last few years. Star-level players are missing twice as many games this year as they did in the 2023-24 season. You had another NBC game last night with the Spurs and the Memphis Grizzlies. No Ja Morant, no Victor Wembanyama. And as Tom Haberstroh writes, it's gotten so bad that nearly half of all NBA All-Stars are suddenly now injured. A handful of former players have chimed in on this as well, and you've heard the same thing of soft tissue injuries. These are occurring because the league has changed and the sport has changed, where it's no longer a half-court game, it's full court for every single player, for bigs as well, with the ground that you have to cover, the amount of miles that these guys put on, the stress that you're putting on your body, on your joints, on your muscles to cover that ground and to do so explosively. This is why we're starting to see these injuries pop up. And it's the same discussion that we had in the postseason when Dame tore his Achilles, Tyrese Halliburton, Jason Tatum, those guys, not to mention all three of those names are not playing this year. So it is certainly something that you're going to continue to see more of. I think the only logical fix at this point, I would say, is very, very unlikely to occur. Neither players nor teams want to give up any money that would be necessary to reduce your schedule. So what can you do in the interim? I don't know. I mean, the league can't really, because of the stance that they've taken, and they don't want to advertise, well, this is the league where players, get built-in time off because of the optics. Even if that's the right thing, you can't really come back now and say, well, we've changed our mind and we're going to drop the minimum amount of games played to 57 or 60 or something along those lines. So I don't know what you do moving forward, but what I do know is I think we've seen enough to know for these last 2 or 3 years that this is going to be the norm. From here on out, you're going to continue to see soft tissue injuries, and you're going to continue to see big names that are missing time. You just hope it's not significant, right? Like the Bucks experience with Dame, and like the Celtics and Indiana Pacers are currently experiencing with younger players in Jason Tatum and Tyrese Halliburton. So back to the numbers behind Giannis's impact and importance to this group. I don't need to tell anyone listening to this show, hey, Giannis is really important for the Bucks to be successful. I shouldn't need to tell anybody that watches basketball either. But I know Bobby Marks mentioned this right after that injury occurred, and when it became apparent he is going to miss some time here, that the Bucks offense with Giannis on the floor is tops in the league. Their offense with Giannis off the floor is bottom, is 30th, which is obviously suboptimal, less than ideal. But digging into the numbers even more here, I mean, it's jarring. When Giannis has been on the floor this season for the Bucks, their offense increases. Their offensive rating increases by 21 points per 100 possessions. That is the largest increase that Giannis has provided. And I know it's very early, the season's not done yet, but just for contextual purposes, that would be the largest increase by a wide margin that Giannis has provided to his team in the entirety of this being his 13-year career. His high as of right now, his high coming into this season, was 9.2 2 seasons ago, the first year that Damian Lillard arrived. So 9.2 was the height of it for Giannis. And he had been around 8 or so points added per 100 possessions, really starting with the MVP season in 18-19. So he's consistently been in that mix. But 9.2 to 21 as an increase so far this season. Even more than that. Not just the offensive boost and the net rating that Giannis is giving to his team, because by the numbers, Giannis on versus off, there hasn't really been a change with the Bucks defense. And here's the tricky part of all of it too. I suppose we should preface by, I've seen a lot of, I tweeted those numbers out and saw a lot of responses saying, well, this just solidifies that Giannis is the MVP. I don't know that there's any one individual stat you would point to and say, see, this is it. This is the MVP case. There's so much that goes into it. This set of numbers and data specifically, the tricky part and the challenge with it is very dependent on who you are playing with, who you're sharing the floor with, and who's on the floor when you're off the floor. We've seen a lot of bench-heavy lineups for the Bucks, and that is, undoubtedly playing a big role in this. That Doc has talked about. Our bench lineups have not been good this season. We're still kind of searching for that, and now you're going to have to continue searching because you're going to have a lot of bench-heavy lineups for probably 2 weeks now, for 6 or 7 games. But with that, it's the same thing that we've seen in Denver with Nikola Jokic, where Jokic is primarily playing with the starters and not the bench guys. That can juice those numbers for you and what your on-off ratings are. I know Frank has talked about it quite a bit. In the case of Nikola Jokic, his impact for that, the on-off and what he's adding when he's on the floor versus off, those numbers are even greater than what we mentioned for Giannis. So that's why I just say there's no one stat to point to and say this is what makes Giannis the MVP over Nikola Jokic, because if you're going to use this as your model, well, Nikola Jokic's numbers are actually better. But again, the context of who you're sharing the floor with or who you're not sharing the floor with is very important. The more troubling number for me, not just the from first to 30th with versus without Giannis, or the impact that he's given you offensively, a 21 points per 100 possessions boost. It's this. And again, this is because we've seen a lot of bench-heavy lineups and Giannis primarily playing with the starters. But in the minutes where Giannis has been on the floor for the Bucks this season, they have played in those minutes, their numbers have been a team playing at a 58-win pace. Look, first of all, I don't think anybody that's watched this team so far this season in all 15 of their games would tell you this feels like a 58-win team. That's not what the point is in sharing that number. But with him, you go from a team that puts up the numbers that we see from teams that win 58 games to without a 14-win pace. So there lies the problem in what this team is going to need for 2 weeks. You are going to need guys to play over their heads and outkick their coverage and basically clean up the little things and do that against a much, much more difficult schedule. So we'll take a look at that schedule and what those little things are, the margins the Bucks are going to need to win on for at least the next week or two. We'll dig into that coming up after this on today's Locked On Bucks. If you're still overpaying for wireless, it's time to say yes to saying no. At Mint Mobile, their favorite word is no. No contracts, no monthly bills, no overages, no hidden fees, no BS. I said yes to making the switch and getting paid premium wireless for just $15 a month. Mint makes it simple. All plans come with high-speed internet and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can even bring over your own phone, keep your same phone number and all of your contacts as well. You get the same quality service you had before, but for a fraction of the price, and it's super easy to set up. You keep your number, and you're up and running in minutes. So if you're ready to say yes to saying no, then make the switch at mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 a month. Limited time new customer offer for the first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. So this schedule, it picks up. And I don't think it is coincidental that this injury occurred in a stretch that saw the Bucks wrap up 5 games in 7 days. Any way you slice the schedule, you had 5 in 7 days, starting with a Houston Rockets game. You had 6 and 9 days. Any way you slice this thing, November's been brutal for the Bucks, where you started the month playing 3 games in 4 days. Home against the Kings, off, and then 2 games on the road in Indiana, in Toronto. And that's kind of been the carrot that's been dangled in front of the Bucks all month long is, okay, we'll give you 2 days off, but every time we give you 2 days off, there's going to be a price there. So, you played on this every other game cadence for your first 5 games where the Bucks were really good. And I know that is a very, very small sample size of data, but it was good teams that the Bucks played against, save for the Washington Wizards, right? On the road in Toronto, looking even more and more like a good win. Better and better, I should say, as games have progressed. You hung tight with Cleveland. We're not in the business of moral victories, and hey, we almost got them. But it was a marked change from what we saw the year prior. And then your 2 big wins against the Knicks and the Golden State Warriors, especially that Warriors game, to win without Giannis. So the caliber of opponents that they played and the way that they looked, the optics, was, I think, what was drumming up the most, not interest, but just support and belief in this team by Bucks fans. And then the calendar flipped to November, and it's been a bad month for the Bucks. I mean, not just with your win-loss total, but some of the games that you lost. The Kings game, Sacramento, as we've seen, they're not a good team. And that's a game the Bucks should have won with the way that they played for most of the game. That game was there for the taking. You needed to win that game because of the schedule that you have in front of you. So that was a disappointing loss. You go to Indiana, and we expected it to be an emotional game, a highly charged game, even with the Pacers down the players that they were. This was going to be a game that Indiana was up for. And to be clear, they had a ton of injuries. And I know it wasn't the same version of the Pacers, but we saw a banged-up Pacers team on their opening night take the Oklahoma City Thunder into overtime, right? As we remove ourselves from that game, that was a really poor game by the Bucks. With everything we just said in the setup of Miles Turner returning to Indy, this rivalry between the teams, this being a game that the Bucks wanted, the Pacers wanted as well, it was still a pretty bad outing by the Bucks. You follow it up with a brutal loss. Granted, schedule loss, given it's night 2 of a back-to-back. You're flying from Indy into Toronto, as we've mentioned, and the Bucks have said themselves, they didn't get into Toronto until 2 or 3 in the morning that day. Every team deals with it. That was an ugly loss, but it was one you assumed was going to happen because of the schedule. The Indiana one, that's not quite as easy to forgive. Then you get 2 days off, and then you start that stretch that we just mentioned of the 6 games in 9 days, I believe, 7 in 11. Anyway, you slice it with the Cavs. But you beat the Bulls. Chicago was playing pretty well. You felt good about that one. And then for about 3 quarters, you felt good about what you saw at home against the Houston Rockets before you ultimately just weren't good in the fourth quarter. And these are the games that are going to be important for this team. And you can't do anything about that one, about the Kings loss, about that first Hornets loss either. Even that Cavs game, right? Can't do anything about them because they're in the rearview mirror. But those are the types of games that you see why you've got to execute and put those teams away and close out those wins when you have the opportunity to do so, because you don't know what injury is potentially lurking around the corner. And now you're going to have to figure out how to win these games without not only your best player, but arguably the best player in the league. So it makes dropping those winnable games all the more frustrating. That ended up being a bad loss to the Houston Rockets because of the way that you closed the game out. You beat the Mavericks, but that was not a good performance by the Bucks. You turn in an equally bad performance 2 days later against the Hornets and lose that game. You go to overtime with the Hornets. And, the Hornets are probably better than most fans are going to give them credit for. They're still not a playoff team in the Eastern Conference. And then you're just run off the road by the Lakers. That was the disappointing part about Monday, is the way the game started, the fight that you showed. And granted, you built up a 14-point lead that it evaporated very, very quickly. But it felt like we were seeing a different version and kind of a re-energized or recharged version of the Bucks. And that all changed with 3 minutes left in the first half. So, to that other point of the time off and what the cost is, again, 3 days, 3 games in 4 days to start the month of November. Then you get 2 days off. Then you start that stretch of 6 games in 9 days. Then you play this Cavs game. You get 2 days off, and now it's the same thing where you're back to every other game, or every other day, I should say, save for the final day that you're playing in November where you have another back-to-back and the teams on your schedule. So of your 6 games to close out the month here, 5 of them are against teams that are above 500, and in the case of a few of them, pretty good. Philadelphia at home on Thursday. Paul George, as we mentioned, made his return. The Pistons are apparently never going to lose again, as they're a team that's just starting to run away from a lot of the pack now at an Eastern Conference best 12-2. And then the big week, the week of Thanksgiving, 13-2, I beg your pardon, as they won last night. But the week of Thanksgiving, the Blazers kind of been playing similar to the Bucks of late. So we'll see what version of Portland shows up. They've now dropped below 500, and they've been a 5-5 team in their last 10 games with a defense that hasn't been good for those 10 games. And then the 2 big cup games in Miami, in New York, very likely without Giannis for either one of those games. And you finally wrap up the month with the Brooklyn Nets coming to town. But again, as soon as you get through the month of November and you get that 1 day off, then it's in D.C. against the Wizards. You get another day off, and then another stretch of 3 games in 4 days. And those 3 games, home against the Pistons, home against the Sixers, on the road in Detroit against the Pistons. You're going to have to clean things up on the margin. You're going to have to do the little things which the Bucks have not been doing for large portions of this season, really for the last 10 games. That's how you're going to keep things afloat in the games where there is no Giannis. So what I mean by winning on the margins and cleaning up the little things, turnovers, again, by the numbers, the Bucks are not one of the worst turnover teams in the league, but if you just watch the last 3 games, you would think, well, there's no way. They definitely are one of the worst teams. You can't pile up high volume of turnovers. You got to value your possessions and not gift wrap the opponent points off of turnovers, especially without 30-plus points, 32-plus points in the lineup in Giannis, and not only his raw scoring output, the types of shots that he's creating for his teammates. So you've got to be better protecting the ball. They have done a better job rebounding for the last 3 or 4 games, and a big piece of that is leaning into more size. I'd imagine this is a big opportunity for Jericho Sims, but you have to continue to rebound the ball and close out possessions, because that's how you're going to improve your defense, which has just not been good, hovering around the bottom 5 in the month of November. So you got to clean up your work there. And I am curious to see free throws. Doc has mentioned it many times, like, we have to defend without fouling. We're putting teams on the line. We got to clean that up, because in most of these losses this season, if you add up the points off of those 3 categories, opponent free throws, points scored off of turnovers, and second chance points coming via the offensive rebound, the opponents are outscoring the Bucks by a wide margin in those categories. So you can't allow that to happen in games without Giannis. You're going to have to clean those things up as well, but you're going to have to fix the defense. You're going to have to lean into, we need to grind these things out. We need to slow down the game, muck up the game, and try to be a defensive team that's going to hit some threes until our big guy can make his return and essentially rescue us, because of how difficult this schedule is going to be here in the interim. Now, here's the other piece of good news. I've seen a lot of doom and gloom, and as of this moment, the Bucks have, in fact, slid to 11th, out of the playoff picture. But right now, teams 2 through 11, which is the Bucks at 11, the Cavaliers at 2, they're separated by 2 games. And I mean, look no further than this. If the Bucks would have won that game in Cleveland, you are tied with the Cavaliers for the second best record in the East. So that is the good news, in that there are so many teams bunched up right now. Just don't be a disaster. Just clean up those things, weather the storm, and you'll be more than fine. If this injury is longer, if it's more time missed, and if those little things come back to bite you, that's where it starts to become a very, very big challenge, and where you're facing the real possibility of being a play-in tournament team towards the end of the season. But there's obviously way, way too much time left in games to be played to get into any type of discussion there, or even the draft pick discussion. I've seen a lot of it too. I mean, there's been a lot of confusion over the status of these picks. It's too early to get into that talk, but just to clear it up, and I think Ty Windish pointed this out as well, the Bucks are going to have a pick in this summer's draft, and maybe this injury means there's a chance it's going to be a lot better than we imagined. Who knows? But what you need to know is the Pelicans don't have a pick. The Pelicans traded their pick swap to the Atlanta Hawks, so the Hawks get the better pick between the Bucks and the Pelicans, and the Bucks get the other one. And right now, with where New Orleans is, they already fired Willie Green. They have a 2-12 record, which is the 3rd worst record in the league, worst record in the Western Conference. Even if Giannis misses, let's say 3 weeks, I just don't see the Bucks finishing with a worse record than the Pelicans. So even if you don't reach your expected wins total, and this becomes a down season where you're still a playoff team but lower in the mix, you're going to end up getting a much better pick than we've seen in recent memory here for the Bucks. But again, still plenty of time to sort that out, and a lot of things that need to take place here for the Bucks to get back on the right path. That starts tomorrow with Philadelphia in town, and I know this has kind of been a downer and a bummer of an episode. I don't mean it to be that, especially when we see the news that Giannis is not going to miss as much time as I think many of us kind of braced ourselves for and assumed. But it's more of a reality check of, look, you dodged a bullet here. Now let's work on improving these things, because with or without Giannis, these should be non-negotiables, and these are things that we need to do to be a better basketball team and to get back to the level we were playing at for a brief period of time, right? For those first 5 games to start the season. Coming up on tomorrow's show, Camille is going to take a closer look at those opponents coming up on the schedule. Some big ones, as we mentioned, tomorrow night, the 76ers in Milwaukee, and then Saturday night, our first look at the Detroit Pistons. You're going to see both the Pistons and the Sixers quite a bit here in these next 2 to 3 weeks, so Camille's going to take a closer look at those opponents coming up on tomorrow's show, and then, of course, we'll have the recap of the Bucks and the Sixers coming your way on Friday. Leave your thoughts on any of what I just said. Some of the things the Bucks need to clean up. Did you dodge a bullet here? Your expectations for when you're going to see Giannis again and what it means for this team. Leave your thoughts in the comments. We'll get to those on an upcoming show. That'll do it for today, though. Thanks to everybody for tuning in once again on Locked On Bucks. We'll be back to talk to you once again tomorrow.